Humans. Humans on the mix. That's good. That's cool. I'm getting it together at 6 o'clock.
So, I wanted to talk to you about growing up in LA and
right.
that was like. Spacebomb on doing this radio show, and we're talking about sort of Los Angeles music, Wrecking Crew stuff, studio stuff, kind of like just get into the LA music tradition.
All right.
But kind of wanted
I'm the guy.
Yeah. Well, wanted to, as someone who's, I know that you're a nerd about all that stuff, but you also grew up there. So for me, like LA is a place that has a lot to it, a lot of nostalgia or mystery or that, kind of like narrative to it. For you, it's home.
Right.
As well as having some of that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's home as well as I completely mythologize LA.
Right.
And I love the feeling of it. And I guess that's probably because, for quote unquote, growing up in LA, I grew up in the valley, I grew up outside of LA. So it still retains its mystique a little bit.
When did that mythology begin? I mean, when did you get into that music, and what was your entry point into that story?
Well, I guess the stuff that my parents lived in. My dad's lived in LA for pretty much his whole life. My mom's lived in LA for her whole life. Like, my parents are real LA kids,
right?
And so I think they were at the right age when the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac and the big 70s LA thing was happening. So Steely Dan, all that stuff was, I guess, the soundtrack of my childhood. Just driving. My parents used to go to Vegas a lot, and they'd drive through the desert and just listen to Fleetwood Mac, just Rumors over and over.
Were you
Asia.
Right. Right. That's good.
That's kind of that's just my entry point.
Were you aware? I mean, at that time, you're cruising to Las Vegas. Are you aware that music is Los Angeles music and that the roots of it are from LA? Or were your parents aware of that?
I don't even think so. I think that was just the popular sound in that time. That's the stuff that they were attracted to. But I later found out, that so much of that music is, quote unquote LA music.
Right.
And that's, such a big part of my musical DNA. I learned about music through those bands. And I always liked it too. It never was, a lot of people don't like the music that their parents like,
Right.
People don't like ELO or something because their parents listen to ELO. I completely love, I always loved the Eagles and I always loved Fleetwood Mac. Those are things that it's just really good music,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people grow up with that same experience with parents that love Fleetwood Mac or Asia or whatever, and then that place, that creative force is a million miles away. For you, that's right down the street. How does that affect your kind of self? I don't know, your sort of home team pride in what you do as a musician, but also how you are. How does that kind of mold who you are when you begin making music for yourself?
Yeah, I think I probably, growing up, like, took it for granted. I always, when I got into, like, collecting music, like physical music, it was like Amoeba was 30 minutes away, and I was like, cool, I'm just going to drive to Amoeba and shop through, every record ever made. And so I was kind of spoiled by it and didn't really think about how cool LA was. It was just like, that was where I grew up. And then, started making music that wasn't necessarily, influenced by LA. It was just, like early Foxygen is just like Flaming Lips or Beck or something, which is arguably more like Midwestern or something,
Right.
And it took me moving away. I moved to New York for 6 years. And when I moved to New York, I started realizing how cool LA was.
Right.
And I moved back 3 years ago.
When you say that, what do you mean? Like, what can you be more specific about what you realized?
I would go back for a vacation or something, and suddenly everything really did seem like I was a foreigner, or like not a foreigner, someone that didn't grow up in LA coming to LA. Like, everything seemed like the movies.
Right.
Everything just looked beautiful and looked like, everything that I loved about just in terms of like imagery, like the fucking palm trees everywhere, like it looked like the cover of Hotel California. Like it's a beautiful place, and it does, I think it took me, I realized what the LA sound was while living somewhere else. So I started, just craving LA. Right. And when I finally moved back, it constantly, like, every time I sit down, I am like, oh, it's so, I'll go outside or something. I'm like, I'm in LA. Like, this is such an incredible place. It looks so good. And I think, just visually, it inspires me. This is like a terrible thing to say in an interview, but I can't even really explain what it is about this place that is so inspiring to me. For an interview about LA, I don't know.
That's all right. But would you say that changed kind of Foxygen or your musical path too? Do you feel like what you guys have been doing or what you've been doing, like, as a producer, has that kind of shifted in a bit towards
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely, because I feel like there's an LA scene right now with music, and I think it's kind of the San Francisco scene kind of moved down to LA, and so I feel like it's very garage rock and like Burger Records and that kind of lo-fi thing. That's kind of the LA scene right now. But to me, I just want LA to sound like John Phillips or something, like kind of like LA country, Right. There's something about all music that is deemed like LA that is country music,
right?
Which is bizarre, right? Because it's not anywhere near where that stuff, it's pretty far. It's just the beach, and there's nothing that other than, I guess, that like a lot of Western, like all the Westerns were shot out here. So I guess that sort of, it's the Hollywood West. And that's the kind of stuff that I really love about it. Like all the pedal steel players, Yeah, right. Like this is just these LA dudes that have all, were always just like grew up in LA and played country music. It just seemed so bizarre to me. And I guess I try to put that into the things that I do.
Right.
Now, I like to try to carry on that sort of sound.
How influenced would you say, or how have you been influenced by LA being this like industry center? So the reason, part of the reason it's become such an influential town, or certainly it was in the 60s, 70s, and beyond, is Hollywood, and it's big business Hollywood, and like media and culture, and it's an influencer in terms of culture, but it's an industry hub, you know, for lots of different things, not only music, but, you know, movies and et cetera. And
right.
How does that, like, but it's different. It's different than New York. It's a little bit different than that, kind of in its energy. And I don't really know. I've spent a lot of time there, but it's hard for me even to distinguish the different kind of industry energy that's there as opposed to other places in the world. But how would you explain that, or how would you say, and then also how would you say that has influenced you, and how you see like the quote unquote industry, how you see like that other side of the fence that really now, you know, how did you see it growing up, and then like now you're there? I mean, you're in a band, you're in a band on a record label that makes records, and people look at you, you know, as part of a culture.
It's, you know, growing up, like I was all, you know, it's impossible to be like unaware of where you are. Like, I knew so many kids for my whole life whose like parents were actors or worked in the movies or were musicians or, you know, like professional, you know, a grade A, like people. Do you think
that makes you feel like that's not so far away? It's just a person doing a job. Like, that's just my friend's dad who does a job. Like, just like my friend's dad is a high school principal or whatever. And it's like... Totally. So I mean, I think not unreachable. To a certain level until there's someone whose dad is like Will Smith. Right. You know, and you're like, oh, not that I knew Will. I don't know Jaden. But, you know, but there were like kids like that. Like, I remember I went to school with like Rick James's kid. And that was like, whoa, like, that's so weird that your dad is Rick James. But, you know, like everyone's parents worked, a lot of them worked in the entertainment industry, and just like they were cinematographers, or they did, you know, the logos or whatever, or commercials. So, I mean, that aspect of it, working in the entertainment industry didn't seem that like this, what life was. It was pretty bizarre. Like, it was weird. It was kind of just like, it is kind of like living in the movies. Do you feel like the industry is intimidating? I mean, are you intimidated by it? Just, I mean that in a really broad way. Certain aspects of it. I think it's just hard. Like even growing up with those types of people, like when I meet a celebrity or see like a celebrity out, you know, it's still intimidating. It's like still so weird. I mean, less with the music industry, I guess. Like I'm still completely freaked out by actors and the film world and stuff. You know, it really is. That's like a bizarre world to me. I think the film industry is really intimidating to me. That world seems really scary. But the music side of things isn't as intimidating to me. How do you think that affects like how you are kind of self-aware of Foxygen stuff in your own relationship to, you know, people knowing who you are, like in certain situations, you know, or you know, it's like we're in this industry, and like Trey has a great definition of fame is when people know who you are and you don't know who they are. And so like there's various degrees of that, and you know, you have a degree of that to some extent, but Jennifer Aniston has a much larger degree of that, you know, like, or like, you know, it's like I'm never going to be at the Jennifer Aniston level. Yeah, right. But, you know, fame is such a funny thing, and I think it's something that we attach, like, and I guess for obvious reasons, because that's, you know, where movies and TV come from. But How do you feel like growing up around that influences Foxygen's relationship with an audience, or with how you interact with that part of an artist's responsibility and job?
Right. Well, I think it's kind of interesting because I think of Foxygen. I think Sam thinks of Foxygen as like acting in a lot of ways. I think it's definitely influenced our brand as musicians. You know, every album we do is like a different concept, a different film, and we're playing different roles.
Right.
And that's kind of our way of keeping it fresh and not settling into being a band. And I guess we think of ourselves like much more as actors than or I mean, at least Sam, I definitely spend most of my time doing music, but like behind the scenes, like I'm definitely actually a musician, but in Foxygen, I'm like an actor, and making making Foxygen music is like settling into a role. So like, for example, you know, we made this Star Power album that came out last year, 2 years ago. And that was, you know, we were like, you know, portraying like kind of strung out like LA, you know, like speed freaks in the 70s trying to make an album, and that, you know, and that was what the album sounds like, at least to me. So, I mean, I think that sort of aspect of just being able to be like, oh, you're an actor, you can change whatever, you know, you can play as many different roles as possible. You know, that sort of has always influenced us. And I don't know if that comes necessarily from living in LA, but it definitely somewhat comes from that.
Right. Well, I think maybe there's a comfortableness with that job. I mean, without being too simple about it, but was saying like that's a job that people do, and it's a, you know, kind of just a proximity to the craft is different than from, you know, I didn't grow up around that at all.
Well, like we just made this album, you know, that maybe you know about.
Yeah, I know a little about.
You know, we made it in like LA studios, like these classic LA studios, and just being in that environment feels really filmic. Like you just feel like one of those guys. Like I went in, like I drove into the studio every day. It was so much different than working at home. Like I've always worked out of my own studio, but we just, you know, driving on the freeway, like, you know, parking in like the studio lot, you know, going in every day, like a job. Like you felt like, you know, one of the Wrecking Crew or something. Like it feels really cool. And just having that sort of experience, like I've been in studios in other places, but it doesn't feel like that. You know, driving to a studio doesn't feel like it does when you drive to a studio and it's like across from Paramount Studios and you're in the heart of Los Angeles and it looks like Los Angeles. You know, it affects, I think, how you work out here. Yeah,
for sure. What would you say your favorite kind of LA period of music is? I mean, what have you taken the most from? Sort of like early Phil Spector stuff, or Beach Boys, psychedelic stuff, or like Fleetwood Mac, Sound City?
It's all my favorite. You know, it's so different. There's a common thread that runs through all of LA music, and I like to think of that, I guess, as like perfectionism. You know, everything in LA associated with LA music at a certain point is like perfect. You know, it feels sloppy, but it's like, you know, Phil Spector stuff is like perfect playing on everybody's part.
Yeah.
The Sound City 70s stuff is, you know, widely considered the best recorded music, you know, like the best engineered music of all time. Like I love the Phil Spector is as much of an influence on me as like Lindsey Buckingham. Like it all just falls into this category of like LA music. And so I guess I can't specify like what has influenced me most, because I like to think of like, you know, what the best thing to do right now for me is I like to just combine all those things. Right. You know, like the influence is just all of that stuff, like the snare sound on, like, you know, Damn the Torpedoes, but played by Hal Blaine.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, just this whole spectrum that, you know, I don't know.
That's good, man.
Just like rambling about LA.
Well, thanks for talking. I appreciate it.
A Spacebomb production.